This is the Bi-Ennial Audits Oversight Commission. I am Councilman Eric Costello from the 11th. I'm joined by City Council President Bernard C. Jack Young, Comptroller Joan Pratt, Councilman Leon Pinkett III, Councilman Bill Henry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Director of Finance Henry Raymond,
Well,
and Acting Inspector General Stephen Lisnewski Jr. So we're here because of the charter audit, or charter amendment regarding audits. The charter amendment did a number of things. First, it transferred responsibility for the quadrennial audits, which are now biennial, from the Director of Finance to the City Auditor. It increased the frequency of both the performance and financial audits from 4 to 2 years. It provided for staggered audits so that half of the agencies, Group A agencies, will be completed in odd years. The other half will be in even years. Obviously, we're in 2017, so we'll be dealing with Group A today. We added 3 critical agencies to be audited. Those include the Department of Health, Mayor's Office of Employment Development, and the Mayor's Office of Human Services. It provided funding through the Comptroller's budget, which the City Auditor falls underneath the Comptroller, at the same level of funding that the quadrennial audits had been previously funded. It makes some key changes to how the financial audits are conducted so that there is not unnecessary duplication in the work that's already completed under the annual CAFR. It requires the publishing of audit reports on a website. It requires the city auditor, what I believe perhaps the most important piece of this, to conduct follow-up work on the recommendations from each audit. And lastly, it establishes this commission made up of the 7 folks up here. And we're responsible for a number of things, including having at least 2 public meetings per year, advertising those meetings in advance, providing input to the city auditor on the scope of the performance audits, as well as voting on waivers and other recommendations for how those audits should be conducted. So with that, are there any questions from the committee on why we're here before we get into the specific agencies? All right, so moving on to item 3, we have the agencies were grouped in a way the council grouped them in the charter amendment so that no one group was too budget heavy. So we kind of went back and forth to make sure there was the larger agencies were represented in both groups. So the 8 that we'll be dealing with today are the Baltimore Development Corporation, Baltimore Fire Department, Department of Finance, Department of General Services, Department of Public Works, Housing and Community Development, the Mayor's Office of Human Resources, and the Mayor's Office of Information Technology. And with that, if there's no objections from the committee, I'd like to jump right into the schedule and have City Auditor Bob McCarty talk about the schedule so far on the audits. Please.
Did you repeat the last part of it?
To talk through the schedule of where things are at on the previous round, which are the quadrennial audits.
Go here or sit here, or how you?
Wherever you're most comfortable.
Turn the mic on. Oh, you want to go there?
Up there. Yes.
Why don't you get some exercise?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Bob McCarty, City Auditor. The question was where we are on the quadrennial. The 13 quadrennial audits all have been completed. We do have one yet to release, which is DHR, the performance side. It has been completed, and we're awaiting their responses before we can publish it. They've had a personal vacation, and hopefully it'll be done for the March 1st board meeting. That's the goal right now. And the rest have been, do you want background on what they are, or?
When do you expect DHR to provide comment?
Well, hopefully by the end of next week, and in that case, hopefully we'll get it to the board on March 1st.
On March 1st, okay.
The next board meeting.
All right. And BDC was delivered this morning?
Yes, it was presented to the board this morning.
Okay.
Yes.
We have that.
Yep. Any questions on schedule so far? Okay. Can you talk about the schedule moving forward? What Department of Audits will be able to accomplish this year in terms of, we've got 8 agencies, we've got 8 performance, 8 financial, and how soon you can get started on those?
Okay. I'm sorry.
Have they filled the positions that they need to fill in order to perform on that? Mr. McCarthy, I was just asking the chair, have you filled the positions that you were allotted to be able to do this, you know, in a timely manner? Because we don't want to have no expectation of the audit agency if you don't have all your people in place.
We're in the process of, we require additional funding for fiscal year 17 for the positions, and that's in the process right now of us obtaining that.
But you haven't actually hired all of them yet, correct?
No, we haven't got the positions created yet because of the money. The money hasn't been assigned to us yet, appropriated to us yet.
But see, I don't want no expectations to be high unless you have the people in place.
We believe we will be.
Because this charter amendment was what gave you the extra positions. So we don't want the public to get the understanding that these are going to happen right away because you don't have all of your staff in place.
Yes.
Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fair question. But we believe with our existing staff, we can make do until we get the additional positions to keep this on track.
Okay, all right. So you can go
Okay.
ahead and ask the questions you asked.
I missed your questions. I'm sorry.
So, based on what you can get started with existing staff, and then based on your conversations with Department of Finance and the administration about getting that funding transferred to add those FTE positions, will you be able to complete, or at what point will you be at by the end of the calendar year with respect to the 8 performance and 8 financial?
We would hope the worst case to be done all the field work. Worst case, we're hoping to get them all done by 12/31.
Okay.
And continue on each year that way.
Okay. All right. And Director Raymond, do you have anything to add just with respect to the conversations of, I guess, you putting on a different hat now as the Director of Finance and not a member of this entity, with respect to getting the funding over to the Comptroller's office so that they can staff up for this?
We are in the process of addressing the funding issue with available funds remaining in the current year budget, as well as including this as funding decisions for fiscal 18.
Any other questions about schedule for this year? So there were 2 things that we wanted to vote on to make recommendations to you for with respect to the schedule. The first has to do with the schedule range, and the second has to do with the phasing of the Group A agencies. So first, with respect to the range of what the audit will cover, based on when you're starting these audits, what seemed to make the most sense was to cover for Group A fiscal year 15 and 16, which would be July 1 of 2015 through June 30 of 2017.
2000.
Yeah, we need a
17?
clarification for that. Fiscal 15 would begin July 1, 2014, and end June 30, 2015. Fiscal 16 would begin July 1, 2015, and end June 30, 2016.
16, yes.
Yes, I give the
That's
wrong
it.
dates. So
Yeah.
fiscal
15 and 16.
16. So July 1 of 14 through June 30 of 16.
16, yes,
Correct.
yes, sir.
Okay. So do we want to, is there any discussion on that? On the time period that these will cover?
Councilman Costello, do you want me to mention the previous years covered?
Yeah,
Because there was some years skipped from the quadrennial to the biennial. For example, finance only went through 2013, so we're skipping 14 and go to 15 and 16. The same with DPW, but the rest will be okay in Group A. For Group B, one went through 13, the rest went through 14, so we're potentially skipping 14 and 15 for one and 15 for the other, just to make clear the years that are being skipped.
So just so we have a standard baseline, it seems like it would make
Yeah.
sense to start off on the same year, and that was kind of the impetus behind
yeah.
this.
Yes, I agree. I just want to make sure everybody knew we were skipping a year or two.
Okay, so for Group A, we'd be looking at fiscal year 15 through 16. And then it would be safe to presume that for Group B, we would be looking at fiscal years 16 through 17, because
Yes.
Group B would not start until January of 18, right?
Correct.
Okay. So is there any discussion on the time range of the audits that would be covered? Is there a motion to recommend to the city auditor that Group A will cover fiscal years 15 and 16, and Group B will cover fiscal years 16 and 17?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Liznewski? Yeah, yes or no?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Costello, yes. Young?
Yes.
Pratt?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Pinkett?
Yes.
Okay. 7-0. Motion carries. The second has to do with the phasing of Group A financial and performance audits. So in our discussions and based on when these audits were delivered, the two audits that were delivered last were DPW and Baltimore Development Corporation.
Yes.
Okay, and the ones that were delivered at the very beginning were Department of Finance and Department of Housing and Community Development.
Yes.
And we have one new agency, which is the Mayor's Office of Human Services. So, part of the problem that we ran into with the quadrennial charter amendment was that many of these audits were started at the same time. In fact, Director Raymond, I think at one point, 9 audits were in the process of being initiated at the same time, which would have certainly led to some bottlenecks if it was the same entity that was conducting all 9 of those audits, which in this case, instead of going outside of the city auditor will be conducting all of those. So I'd like to recommend for the committee's consideration that we phase these audits and split these up into 3 groups, and wanted to talk through the logic behind that and get the committee's thoughts on that. But my initial thought is that Department of Finance and Housing and Community Development would start in the first wave,
Yeah.
along with the Mayor's Office of Human Services,
Yes,
because they have
agree.
not yet been audited under this arrangement. Starting shortly after would be the Fire Department, the Department of General Services, and the Mayor's Office of Information Technology. And then starting last, based on the timing of when those audits were delivered, would be the Department of Public Works and the Baltimore Development Corporation. Is there any discussion on that? Any thoughts, concerns, questions? Councilman Henry?
I'm just practicing my reflective listening here. So wave 1 would be finance, HCD, and Mayor's Office of, I'm sorry, did you say Human Services?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then wave 2 would be fire, general services, and MOIT. And then wave 3 would be DPW and BDC?
Yes, sir.
Okay, got it, thank you.
Any other questions, concerns, thoughts? Okay, is there a motion to recommend that phasing to the city auditor?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, Liznewski?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Costello, yes. Young?
Yes.
Pratt?
Yes.
Pinkett?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries 7-0. So moving on to overview of the financial audit process. Mr. McCarty, can you just talk about, at a high level, keeping in mind that you didn't conduct all of the financial or performance audits during the quadrennial audits process, can you talk about it at a high level, generally what work was done, and also briefly talk about the change in how the financial audits will be conducted under this new process?
Sure. In financial audits, we did a full-blown audit. We did a balance sheet, income statement, and statement of changes in fund balance. It had the notes, and it was a full audit. We did our usual testing of payroll, costs. We gained an understanding of all the systems involved in the financial reporting for each group. Finance prepared the reports for us, It's going to be changed for this next round. We did some research and we found through the Yellow Book, which referred to the AICPA requirements, that as long as disclosed in the notes, we can just do an income, expenditure, and budget statement to show that comparison. And I believe Finance was happy with that. We have been meeting with them. I think we have one last meeting with them tomorrow, maybe to do a few last discussion points, and then we'll be ready to start.
Yeah, Finance concurs.
And we would do a regular testing and everything too, would just be having one statement,
Great.
which I think is more of interest to the committee and the Board of Estimates.
Councilman Henry?
So I'm gonna, our colleague from the 14th isn't here, but if she was, I believe she would say, so did you find anything? Like,
On-
when you were shaking the cushions of the sofa, did you find any?
Oh,
Anything
we had we had findings in the performance side. On the financial side, we had a few findings on the finance. I could give you a summary of those, or?
Well, the specific summary I'm looking for is, did the financial audits turn up that we had money we didn't think we had?
No, sir.
That's, okay. That's the only, that's the good news that it would have been nice to hear, but okay, that's all I'm looking for.
Okay.
Because they're all online. People can look at them
Yes.
individually if they wish. But, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
You can go to the Department of Finance's website.
That's
and then you
correct.
can click on public information, and then you can click on quadrennial audits. I'm looking at you, Joanna. And then you can click on reports, and they are all listed there in their PDF downloads, correct?
That is correct.
And if,
And I'd like to go back to Councilman Henry, just to reiterate with the financial audits that were completed previously under the quad audit process. All of the audits were unmodified, meaning the audits were clean. There were no instances of financial fraud, and I think that's important for this body to note.
Okay, thank you.
So,
and
one of the provisions that's in the charter amendment has to do with us issuing a waiver for any agency that conducts its or has its own financial audit conducted independently, so as to not duplicate resources. I know that Kim Clark is here from BDC. Ms. Clark, if you could just briefly, 1 or 2 minute, explain the process that BDC goes through to conduct their own audit, why that's required, being a 501c3, and whether or not that's going to change, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay, so as you've just stated, we are BDC, actually the City of Baltimore Development Corporation is a 501c3 organization. We have annual financial audits conducted, and our most recent ones have all been unmodified, meaning clean, as you continue to hear. I'm going to address the CPAs. What, unmodified? Really? Can't you just say clean? So we will continue to have those done because we not only have city money coming into our coffers, while not a large amount, we do have some private money that we raise on our own and collection of fees for services that we render to folks other than the city. So we will continue to have our annual financial audits completed by an independent CPA firm.
Mr. McCarty, do you have anything to add, or?
yes, Director of Finance presented those to us, and we reviewed them, and we had no problem. They were clean opinions.
Okay.
I might suggest in the future maybe they be submitted to the Board of Estimates separately.
Seems to make sense, Director.
Yeah, we have no objections to that.
Okay. So, any other questions on what BDC is doing? So, would it make sense to take a motion to A, recommend that BDC submit their annual financial audit to the Board of Estimates, and B, that we do not, or that we issue a waiver to Mr. McCarty so that BDC does not have to undergo a financial audit when they're already undergoing one?
So moved.
Second.
Second, okay. Liznewski?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Costello, yes. Pratt?
Yes.
Pinkett?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Young absent. Can come back, revote that when he gets back.
And, Councilman, going back to the website, effective with the biennials, we will start having all the audits on our website, starting, with this round.
Okay,
Okay.
excellent. Is there a motion to revote it now that Council President Young is back?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Okay, the motion again was, Part A, had to do with BDC submitting their financial audit to the Board of Estimates once it's completed, and Part B was to issue a waiver to Mr. McCarty and not having to do a BDC audit. Lizniewski?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Costello, yes. Young?
Yes.
Pratt?
Yes.
Pinkett?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
Motion carries 7-0. And can we get to that in 1 second?
Sure,
the-
sure.
The part about the website. Is there any other discussion about the financial audits before we move on to what will likely be the lengthier part of the conversation, which is the performance audits? Okay. Can you talk a little bit about the, again, just from a high level, keeping in mind that you didn't do all of these audits, the quadrennial audits, findings, and recommendations, and what those looked like at a high level?
Okay, at a high level, some were specific and some were general, like some agencies didn't have the documentation to support the goals or the targets.
And
Is it-
so what happens when an agency doesn't have documentation to track something? What does the auditor generally recommend?
It's generally to comply with the city's administrative manual for record retention, set up a system to keep track of everything. There'd be a recommendation to that, and then we would do a follow-up with that the next round.
Okay.
And they, of course, they get to respond and say what they're going to do as part of the audit report also.
Okay. So this document that was provided in advance of the hearing has the audit areas and objectives, as well as findings and recommendations. This information is online. We'll make sure we get it on that website that you
Sure.
discussed, Mr. McCarty, moving forward. There are 6 agencies included in here of the 8 that we're looking at. BDC is not included because that audit was delivered this morning. Mr. McCarty and his team helped put this together. I just put some pretty colors on it and printed it
Thank
up
you.
for you guys. But please know that him and his team did the work. And then the other agency, the Mayor's Office of Human Services, obviously is not included in here because an audit was not conducted of them as part of the quadrennial audits process. So my thought was we could step through the committee, each of the 8 agencies, and talk about the ideas that we would like to see explored during this next round of performance audits. Hopefully, keeping in mind that anything that was looked at last time is required to be reviewed again as part of the recommendation follow-up. So, for example, if we were looking at DOT and bridge inspection was looked at, please know that whatever recommendations were made with respect to bridge inspection are going to be covered. So if our heart's desire is to really look at streetlights for DOT, we can look at streetlights and be rest assured that we, yes, sir, Mr. President, rest assured that we will look at bridge inspections. So with that, I'm just going to open up the floor to discussion. And at the end of discussion for each one, I would ask Mr. McCarty if you have any insight or ideas that you'd like to share, things that you'd like to focus on for each of these agencies moving forward.
Okay.
Are we going in order?
Yeah, let's go in order, yep, as they're on this spreadsheet. So the first one is Department of General Services.
I'm more interested in the upkeep of the city buildings because we have not done a great job of making sure the city buildings are, up to par. I was riding down Hillen Street, and right at the Department of Wastewater, or Department of Water, and it's like coming back from Morgan, and the roof is caving in. And then the Enterprise Fund, they had plenty of money. No roof should be caving in on that city property. I don't know if anybody looked at that, but I'm getting ready to take Mr. Child on the tour, because most of our buildings look like crap. Okay, I don't know whether general services are responsible for that, but you know, I'm concerned about the conditions of some of the buildings that we own. We should be taking care of our own buildings.
Okay.
City Hall is number one, because downstairs in City Hall, all that vacant space where legal they left.
Basement, yeah.
And we could utilize that space if they do the work that need to be done down there.
Also, I think we should be concerned about how vacant city buildings are secured, because there's a lot of vandalism, and then there are claims that the city has to file, which increases our insurance premiums. So we need to do a better job of securing our city our vacant buildings.
Anyone else?
Yeah, I just wanted to second what Council President said as far as the maintenance of the city buildings, stressing the preventive maintenance that's required on the buildings. And then in addition to that, making certain that we have good records relating to the leasing of those buildings. I think those are two critical issues.
Okay, thank you.
So we had requests for looking at the leasing of the buildings, looking at how vacants are secured, the extent to which city buildings are adequately maintained. Did that cover everything?
Inside and outside.
Inside and outside?
Sorry, yes.
Can I, and I'm not certain if this is the appropriate, but we're about to get a big influx of school buildings through the 21st century, and how that whole process is managed and disposition, and even the planning as it relates to, we know what buildings are going to be coming offline. You know, how are we getting ahead of that, you know, in anticipation of those buildings becoming vacant?
Can I add to that?
Yes, sir.
Well, we can't argue the school system. I don't think general service is responsible for our school buildings. The surplus ones, but see, we, general service, should pay attention to the school buildings that are surplus, that still have bond debt on them, because I think we should be looking at surplus in the school buildings that doesn't have bond debt on it. Because some of these schools that they are closing are in perfect condition, while other schools that they're keeping open are in deplorable condition. And the city is on the hook to repay those bond debts. So if we could, you know, look at that as well.
Okay, yes, sir.
General service with the surplus building, because like Controller Pratt said, we need to figure out how we're going to secure these buildings. Right at Rayner Brown, perfect school. They went and they closed it. Perfect school, recently renovated, and they stripped it of everything, all the pipes, all the air conditioning, and everything. And the city was on the hook to go in there and redo it all because some nonprofit is getting the building. We don't want to make it too difficult.
Yeah.
So because it seems like we're gonna have a half dozen ideas per agency, in order to do follow-up to make sure that our ideas have been captured by Mr. McCarty and his team, does it make sense to request, you know, maybe a week or 2 weeks out that Bob submits something to the committee with kind of an overview of what performance measures he wants to look at, so we can make sure we're all on the same page? Is everyone good with that?
That'd be fair to him.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay, absolutely. All right, any other concerns with DGS before we move on? Baltimore Fire Department? Councilman?
So I wanted to preface this by asking sort of a procedural question. one of the findings and recommendations, it's listed as BFD 01, deals with the fact that it's difficult for the fire department to make sure that all businesses have been inspected for being up to fire code, because they're not told when there's a new business in an existing building. And so my question sort of procedurally is, I know that we're here to talk about the direction that future audits should go, but since it is a performance audit, is it reasonable to talk about what other ways we can try to address that problem? I mean, is it worth trying to have conversations about the individual findings and recommendations in that regards, or should we just be limiting our comments and questions to what an auditor could do in the future?
My initial thought to that was that's an important piece of the conversation, but it isn't something that would happen with the first round, because we didn't really have any input into what the scope of the quadrennial audits were. And that's one of the reasons why we didn't invite agency heads here. For example, it would be very useful to have, I think I saw Roman Clark before. I don't know if he's still, yep, he's there. But it would be very helpful to have, not that Roman Clark doesn't know the fire department inside and out, but it would be very helpful to have not only Chief Ford here, but to have the appropriate person who handles this, whether it's program director or deputy chief or whatever the case may be. So that's why we had requested just government relations / legislative affairs / special assistants to bring these issues back to agency heads. So I think if there is a specific one like this, my instinct is that now would be the appropriate time to say to fire department officially, we'd like to get some more information on this and start the dialogue on it.
All right.
And we can do that, Councilman, however you like, whether it's request something in writing or set up a meeting.
I will simply muse publicly that I'll be having an offline conversation with Roman about possible ways that we can do additional regulation that could help the fire department solve this problem. I would, however, go also to BFD 09, fire suppression and emergency response, percentage of responses within 5 minutes. And there I had a question about the findings, where it said we're not able to agree EMS response times provided for April 2011 to the city stat report. Just as a sort of a policy question, are crews expected to call in when they reach the scene such that there's a timestamp to that call somewhere, and that's how we determine response time? Otherwise, how do we determine response time at all?
Yeah, we didn't do this audit. I'm sorry, I don't know the details on this, but I can find them out for you.
Okay. Well, that would be a question I would have, and I would appreciate it if someone could get us the information of, because I think that's a very reasonable area for you guys to be looking at, and I'm curious as to how, what is your base data when you're judging the the fire department's response. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'd be interested in seeing, for you to attempt to determine the amount of time that it takes on average to complete inspections on the BFD side related to opening a new business. So for example, there's a requirement as part of the UNO, use and occupancy, that you have to have a fire inspection. And I'd be curious to know how efficient our fire department is in completing those inspections.
Okay.
And in cases where we're outside of, thinking like outside 1 or 2 standard deviations, why is that? Once we get out of that reasonable period of time.
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
If I could follow up on that, and I saw our colleague from the 7th also nodding. So that is a common concern across the city that it seems like that takes longer than the business who is anxious to open, would hope it would. The other part that goes along with it that I have heard back from both inside and outside the department is that the fire marshal prefers to go last in terms of when all agencies are, signing off on a building that's getting ready to open. There's a perception, if not a fact, that the fire marshal likes to go last. And it is unclear whether that is just a workflow thing where, if you're the last step, then you have nobody bugging you on the other end to, get stuff to them. But, or if there is an actual, some aspect to the inspection process for the fire department such that they need all the work, they need absolutely everything else to have been done before they can legitimately do their work. And if that's the case, not unlike with the question about the response time, while I would agree that it would be important for us to know the amount of time it takes for the fire department to do its work, I would also look for how that time was determined after the fact in terms of how are we making sure we know that this is the point in which everything else was signed off, and from here until the date in which fire signed off, that would be the amount of time it took fire.
Okay,
Yep. Thank you.
thank you.
Anyone else on fire?
On
Oh,
fuego.
I worded that the wrong way.
I'm not on fire.
We're on fuego.
Does anyone have any input for the audit for BFD? Got it, all right. Mayor's Office of Information Technology. I'll add something. Oh, Mr. President, go ahead.
I would like for you to just look at whether they have the tools that they need to move into the 21st century. Because we're a little behind there. I don't know whether we invested a lot in that, and we should. That's my only.
Thank you.
Basically, you're saying the tools and the infrastructure, and that's where the real cost is, the infrastructure,
Thank you.
and what needs to be done.
I know this is something that my colleague from the 7th District and I have been working on. I'd like to know the extent to which the fiber network is being mapped out across the entire city, whether it's public or private sector.
Okay.
I'd like to know that too.
Makes two of us. Third, Councilman Pinkett. Yes, sir. I'd also be interested in whether or not MOIT is using uptime for both external-facing websites as well as internet service for city employees as a performance metric.
Could you give me that again? I'm sorry, could you?
Sure. So let me split it up into two different things. Part one is MOIT tracking the amount of uptime that external-facing websites are up? So if I go 100 consecutive minutes in a row to try and access the Department of Finance's website, is it going to be up all 100 minutes? And the same thing goes for internet service internally. I know that we frequently go without internet service inside of City Hall. And I have heard similar things from employees at the Benton building and at the Woolman building. And we live in the 21st century, and internet service is absolutely critical to completing our job function. So I'm wondering, is MOIT tracking that? What is the extent to which internet services are up and running. Anyone else for Moet? Moving on to housing and community development. Mr. McCarty, do you have any ideas?
Not at this time, no. We go through the budget book to get our initial ideas, and I haven't had a chance to do that yet. We have done MOHS, that's the one we've done so far. This was a new one.
Anyone, any ideas on HCD? Okay, I guess you can get back to us. When
Sure,
you-
we'll give you some suggestions.
Department of Finance?
Be gentle now.
Did you say something about Henry's vacation?
Want to find out where the money is? Audit that. Let's audit all those different funds that's over in the Department of Finance. We're looking for money.
Okay.
I know there's the billing integrity unit with Tom Law falls under your shop, right, Henry? So Bob, the billing integrity unit deals with tracking down property owners that are in violation of things like the homestead tax credit. And there's kind of a fixed cost to put one of those analysts out on the street, if you will, to start to do that work. And they bring in they have a pretty nice return on investment. The ROI for them is something in the neighborhood of like 7 or 8 to 1. So for $150,000, we can bring in $1.2, $1.5 million in revenue that's left on the table. So I think I'd be curious to know the extent to which the billing integrity unit is collecting on tax fraud, and the extent to which they have the resources to do that. I'd love to see, some Director Raymond and I have talked about several times, the groundwork for a case to be made to expand that function to capture tax revenue that we're losing out on. Anyone else on finance? DPW?
Hello. So, DPW 01, vacant abandoned property cleaning and boarding, rat burrows baited. So Ms. Collins knows that this has been a pet peeve of mine for several years now, that the way we approach rat abatement in Baltimore is reactive and not proactive, in that when somebody complains that there are rats, like I'm in property A, my neighbor in property B has rats, on their property and they're running over onto my property, I call 311, I report it, an inspector comes out, inspects property B, sees that there are rat burrows, leaves a notice saying, we see you have rat burrows, please sign this form and give us permission to come onto your property and bait the rat burrows. Unsurprisingly, many people don't return that form. In other jurisdictions, the form that is left is a form that says, if you do not send back this form within a certain amount of time, giving a compelling reason for why we should not, we will be back in X number of days to bait these burrows. In conversations that I have had with the administration over the past couple of years, we thought we had tracked this problem down to one where rat abatement used to be an issue, used to belong to the health department. And the health department and the health commissioner, specifically in the charter, has the power of a public health emergency to go onto somebody's property and deal with an issue without their permission. The director of public works doesn't have that power, and there's been difficulty in figuring out how to either convey that power over to DPW or share the authorization of it such that the health commissioner's power can be used. I'm asking you this question now to ask if in the future, when this area is examined, could it be looked at with an eye towards either moving rat abatement back to the health department where the authority to go onto somebody's property without their permission exists, or could that be taken into account in dealing with this problem moving forward? I specifically ask because I was told that the reason why it was moved from health to DPW was there was an expectation that DPW would be better equipped to handle the work. But if the very first finding is that they're not meeting the targets for 2 fiscal years in a row, then I would question whether that was a successful move, and maybe we should have just left it in the health department in the first place.
Okay. When we follow up, we'll look at what the charter says for the health commissioner and see if we can recommend something on that.
Thank you.
Councilman Henry, I just want to share something with you that was told to me as recently as, I think about 9:40 today, where they're looking at in DBW of doing sectors, and they're going to have rat abatement in each one of the sectors that are responsible, along with the other DPW crews, to do cleaning, rat abatement and all that as a part of their daily routine. So I was briefed on that today.
Excellent.
So maybe that would help us out a little bit. But he still should look into that.
Yes.
But that's what I was told today by Director Chow.
Thank you.
So they're going to go on to property?
I didn't ask him that.
See, so that would be a good one where we should find out the specific details, because Baltimore County, they started doing that, I think a year and a half ago, maybe even a smidge longer, where yes, they are just on a rotating basis moving through the entire county and baiting whatever boroughs there are in that area. But that involves going on to private property without proactive permission from the property owner, and Baltimore County is okay with that. However they're set up, they're okay with that. I would want to make sure that if DPW is doing this by sector, what they mean is they're going and actually baiting every borough in each sector, as opposed to just they're going to respond to all complaints sector by sector. Because if they're just going to go through each sector and still leave the notes that require us to come back after we get something in the mail, I'm not sure if that's going to help a whole lot. But thank you.
Well, I think as a legislative body, we can give DPW that authority. So we might need to think about that.
I had one thing for DPW. It was related to, I guess, a report on household trash collection broken out by neighborhood, so that we could see the difference between the recycling collection and the other trash collection, in order to strategically, if we find recycling isn't effective in certain neighborhoods, so we can be more strategic in our outreach and education to increase recycling in certain neighborhoods.
And also, we probably should take a look at in certain neighborhoods, because of the density, I get complaints that the one-day trash pickup is not sufficient, that maybe we could take a look at whether there should be a 2-day trash pickup in certain areas where there's a lot of density.
Just adding to the comptroller's point about that, oftentimes it seems like bulk trash isn't picked up as frequently as it could be. So I'm just wondering, you know, how effective are we at collecting bulk trash, especially in conjunction with the regular trash days?
Okay.
Maybe there's opportunities to, you know, if it's a smaller piece of bulk trash, say it's a coffee table, to pick that up while the trash is being picked up, as opposed to sending out another crew, which is more costly to the taxpayer. Anyone else on DPW? Baltimore Development Corporation. Oh, that's a mess. Yeah, that's 3 agencies. Parks, DOT. Bill Cole did. Baltimore Development Corporation, you know, one of the things that I think is often overlooked is the Small Business Resource Center that Paul Taylor runs, which is kind of run out of BDC. I'd be curious in how often is BDC visiting small businesses, and what the frequency of that is. So for example, like BDC may go to Councilman Henry's business once, Councilman Pinkett and Comptroller Pratt's business 3 times, and the rest of us not at all. And I suspect that there's some type of correlation between the frequency of their visits and the success of those small businesses. And that could be tracked through different metrics, whether it's things like facade grants or hours that, you know, the Small Business Resource Center spends in business counseling those small businesses, to kind of demonstrate the need for those services for small businesses throughout the city.
I wrestled with this, and I decided I'm going to go for it. In a scenario like that, I would have to ask, since there is a good chance that there's also a correlation between how often Councilman Henry and Councilman Pinkett call the BDC and ask them to go see a business in particular, how do we control for that? I mean, assuming that the expectation is that BDC is trying to provide some measure of small business assistance and connection across the board, where there are spikes in the counts, how do we tell the difference between those spikes because for some internal reason of the BDCs, they are also going back to other businesses versus how many times they're asked back in one to a particular business, but not asked back for another.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, and I should have added more clarification to what I was trying to get at. I think we want to see BDC making those visits proactively,
Yeah, okay.
as much as possible, and making sure they have the resources to continue to make those visits. Because I think what we'd find is that regardless of whether it's initiated by the business owner or it's randomly done by BDC, that we're getting good results out of it and helping our small businesses to thrive and be successful. So, but does that, Councilman Henry, does that kind of get to what you were saying?
Yep, thank you. Sorry.
Sure. And I'm not certain if this fits into the performance audit, but is there the potential to make certain that there's a process to monitoring any profit sharing agreements that might come through, actions by BDC, making certain that there's a annual review of any agreements that were made that would bring other resources to the city.
Okay. I'm not sure if there are profit-sharing agreements, but I'll look into it.
Right. I mean, so we would have to look to make certain, see if there are any
Yes, and then-
in the past, and then make certain that there's a process by which we're annually monitoring those agreements.
Okay.
And thank you, Councilman Pinkett. That made me forget something. And Ms. Clark, we had talked, last year as the Port Covington TIF discussion was going on and that legislation was being considered. It'd be, and I think this function really fits into Department of Finance as opposed to BDC, but just tracking all of the metrics around these larger projects that have economic development incentives, such as TIFs and pilots, things like the number of employees attracted to a specific employer at a development that undergoes a large economic development incentive. For example, the BDC audit that was delivered this morning dealt with number of jobs created, for example, with
Yes.
various projects. And, I wonder if that's something that finance could help to track moving forward. And it's not just the jobs created. I mean, it's the real estate taxes for that development as the increment is used to pay off the bonds in the case of the TIF. It's also things like the personal property taxes and the income taxes that are paid from there to demonstrate whether or not these projects are successful or not. And the reason I bring that up is because last summer when we were dealing with Port Covington, I think we knew that a lot of these larger projects, Mandam is a great example, Mandam and Mall, that they were successful. We just didn't necessarily have the hard data to show it. But we all know when we see something like that, we know that's successful, and that's the type of thing we want in the city. So I don't know if that's something that maybe fits under finance more appropriately than BDC.
I'm not sure where it's best,
I'm
but
veering
we
off
had,
here, so I apologize.
we had a we had a finding today where with BDC that they're reporting projected jobs rather than actual jobs, and part of the resolution was that BDC is going to meet with finance and myself to see a better way of doing of tracking these.
Okay. Anyone else for BDC? And last is Mayor's Office of Human Services. And Mr. McCarty, it sounds like you guys already have a couple ideas.
I have a couple. I'm prepared to. Excuse me.
Please do share.
Again, it's a new one for us, so we wanted to get a feel for it. Our basic starting point is the budget book for each agency. And MOHS is a large agency, a lot of grants. And we just went through to pick things that we think would be of interest and they are supposed to be reporting on. The first one was on Head Start. And we picked two of these. One is basically verifying the number of children that are actually entering in the early Head Start and Head Start service program. The other one was percentage of enrollment that was during the contract period. They are reporting, their targets are around 3,600 for the number of children, but their target dropped from 14 to 15 from 3,600 to 759. I believe it's because part of it's been outsourced, but it was a dramatic drop. And the other one, that percentage of employment, we noticed that it's 100% each year. We just want to know if that's reasonable. And stop me if I'm taking too many, okay? But I'm just going to go through them real quick. Next one was homeless prevention. The first one we looked at was the number of eviction prevention grants provided. Their target was 1,040 for each year. And the other one was number of households who received MOHS-funded EP grants, which is eviction prevention, that remain housed for at least 3 months. We thought that was important to look at, too. I can make copies of these for you, too, if you would like this. The next group we went to was temporary housing. Again, we picked two. Basically verifying the number of persons utilizing temporary housing. Did they meet their goals in finding temporary housing for this population? And the percent of persons moving from temporary housing to permanent housing. Again, they have a very, hopefully it's a good percentage. 60%, it seems high, but we have to look into that. The next group we looked at was permanent housing for the homeless, and we just picked one for here. And the outcome was number of eligible clients who maintain permanent housing for 6 months or longer. And it's in the 2,000 range that they're reporting. And that is it. It's a start. We can get these summarize these and get them to you.
Also, I would like to, since you mentioned that they receive a lot of grants, that we
Yes.
want to make sure that the grants are closed out properly and that if there's grant funding that hasn't been spent in one grant, it may be restrictive that it's not offset against another.
Okay.
So that definitely needs to be monitored.
Okay, thank you.
Can we also add to the, what you mentioned, excuse me, about temporary to permanent, the time frame that it takes to transition from temporary to permanent?
The amount of time?
Yes.
I said, sure.
Anyone else on MOHS? So we've given you, I'm sure, a couple pages of notes.
Yes.
Committee members, does it make sense to ask the city auditor to provide something back to us in writing? Do you think 2 weeks would be enough time to get us let's say a week and a half by next Friday to get us that would be February 24th, a bulleted list of just the performance measures where you'd like to look. If there was anything that you heard from the committee that was a concern or didn't make sense for you to look into, as well as if there's anything else your team can think of that we didn't bring up that you think needs to be looked into.
Mr. Chair, can I add one more thing to MOHS?
Yes.
I have a concern that when a resident gets to MOHS, that MOHS becomes more of a one-stop. So is it possible to also monitor when someone is engaged, how many services they're made eligible for, or that are identified, so that somebody's not coming multiple times, but once they come, we're doing, finding out all the wraparound services that they're eligible for.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may go back to Finance, Office of Risk Management, one moment. We did have a concern on the procedures and policies of the processes and frequency of those processes that risk management requires agencies to update, maintain, and report any changes, deletions, or additions of employees that actually secure CDL licensure. Okay, and this is just to assure that all drivers are properly and legally licensed, and each agency maintains the supporting documentation for these CDL licensure licensed employees in order to avoid any liability on part of the city in the event of any accidents and so forth.
Okay. Thank you.
Should that, you mentioned that that's maintained by each agency?
I was under the impression it was risk management 2 years ago when it was brought to their attention from our office. We had done an evaluation on some fraudulent CDL licenses, and they were going to start maintaining the policy and procedures that they would maintain all the information. But this information would have to be gathered or received from the various agencies that have CDL drivers.
So would it make sense for DHR to be the repository for all that, or?
That's a good question. I'll have to, I can research it and find out more about it. Okay.
So, something in writing by next Friday, are you comfortable with that?
I can make it work, yes.
Okay,
Close the business, I hope, though. In the day, okay.
yes.
It's a holiday weekend, so it's
Okay.
kind of things. Okay.
Monday, President's Day. No,
Yeah.
This Monday's
Next Monday,
President's
whatever.
I didn't know I had a day.
Also, does it, just to the committee members, does it make sense, once we get this list back from the city auditor, to try and narrow these down to, say, 3 or 4 items per agency, so that there's not just like a 30,000-foot audit, but that we're actually looking into some detail on the performance side of things?
We need to prioritize, yeah.
Everyone's good with that?
Mhm.
So we were supposed to take a vote on it, so I suppose the motion is to ask the city auditor to send something back to us in writing in a week and a half, and by Friday the 24th, and we will circulate amongst the committee and aggregate everyone's feedback with Ms. Murray's assistance, and then send something back to you formal. Is there a motion to do that?
So moved.
Second? Wisniewski?
Yes.
Raymond?
Yes.
Costello, yes. Young?
Yes.
Pratt?
Yes.
Pinkett?
Yes.
Henry?
Yes.
All right, and thought was we would come back sometime late summer for the next meeting. You're what? You're busy in the summer? Is that what he said?
That's when we do most of our work in the summer.
I said I'm busy this summer. Maybe we could do fall.
Fall or spring? All right, so what do you,
As needed.
as needed, but twice a year, so
At the direction of the chair.
we'll all be in touch over email, and, I think we would ask, if anything big comes up out of the ordinary, during the course of these audits, that you would let us know. I know you and I stay in regular touch, so I have no doubt that we'll be talking and continuing the dialogue, and, we'll shoot for something late summer, early fall for the next one.
Okay.
Anything else from anyone? Thank you, Mr. President, and everyone for.
Thank you.
And thank you all for your input. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.